Okay, now that the background is all dry, I think I'm ready to go ahead and we can get started with the green. Now, a few things before we start on the stems and this upper bud is if you pulled the masking fluid off. Now, I will say this, I have a little faint area where some of it got through, wasn't paying attention. And then I had some blue on my finger and I touched it right there. So that one, those were both, they were preventable, but I should have been a little bit more careful. So anyhow, if you pull off the masking fluid and you see that around the edges things are really ragged and it just doesn't look very good, if you kept any of your background color, just use a little bit of it and go right around the edges and clean it up. Now, I did a pretty good job because I knew that the background was so dark that I was going to have to be extremely careful with the masking fluid, and this is where all your hard work pays off. So I feel like I did a good job. I did have to pick up some of my background, and there was a couple of little spots just right around this lower area that I had to add. I had to add some more background color in, but other than that, I feel like it's just beautiful. It is perfectly flat. There are no waves and no bumps. And so what I'm going to do is this time I'm going to take my number, what am I using? My number 2. And oh, one thing I did notice is right in here is a little tiny bit of the flower blossom peeking out. So I'm going to kind of pay attention to that. And if you notice, there's a lot of little white areas that are kind of outlining where the sun is hitting on the leaf areas. Now you can do a couple different things. You could, if you've got a really tiny, like even a toothpick, and you could mask out all those out, or later on you could use an X-Acto knife to take them out, but I'm going to take them out with my Dremel tool. Okay, but the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put some paper towels down because I do not want to ruin this background. I feel like this is honestly, one of my best solid dark, not solid dark, obviously we have colors here, but I just feel like it's one of my best dark backgrounds. So I do not want to mess that up. And I'm going to go with a very small brush, and well, I guess I don't need, I'm going to stick with this small brush. I'm going to go everywhere around that. In fact, let me enlarge that a little bit so I can see what I'm looking at. Okay. So now I'm going to be very careful as I go up to the edge. Now, one great thing about these outer is because it's all backlit, right? So this is actually a good thing because if you don't want to go right up to the edge, if you're worried about pulling any of the color in, stay back a little bit from it. Because we're gonna be picking that color up anyhow. Okay, see how I'm going right around that little area of pink. And then everything else, it's just that one tiny area. Oh, see, put a little dot of color there. So, and if you've got your image a little bit bigger, you can use a bigger brush. But I'm going to do just like I did in the background, and I want to completely cover this area with water. One of the reasons why I don't like, why I'm more comfortable with these tiny brushes is because I can control how much water and color is going on the paper. If the brush is too big, then it just, as soon as the tip of the brush hits the paper, it just releases everything. Okay, so I'm going to look at it in an angle, and you can see how much water I've actually got on there. One little area I missed. And then I'm going to keep doing this for all the areas, but for now, we're going to focus here, and then we'll go back down to the... Now, I will say this. Oh, and there you can see the little area that I did not add water to. And missed. Okay, now I'm going to go to my 0 so I can get up into this little corner area. Okay, so back to what I was going to say about the water. It's important. It's always important, no matter what you're painting, what your water level is in your image. Is it going to be as critical as our background? No, but you still want to make sure that you've got plenty of water on the area that you're going to paint so that you're not dealing with overworked areas. And that happens because you don't have enough water in the paper, and then your brush strokes start becoming very choppy looking, and that is what being overworked is. So you want to avoid that. Okay, so I'm making my yellow very thin. It's not as thick as when I had it in the background. Remember, okay, here's the background. And here's what I've got now. So I'm just keeping it very, very light. So you want a nice thin layer of yellow. And remember, your yellow lightens up quite a bit as it dries. So this is just our first layer. So I'm just moving it around. And actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull it away a little bit from this area because there's a lot of blue in there. There's very little yellow. And there's a lot right through the center here, and then not much down in the corner there. So I'm going to keep that yellow away from that area. Okay, and then we're going to go ahead and let that dry. Okay, so now let's go ahead and move. Let's keep our background covered, and let's go ahead. Oh, and one little area I've got to take off. There's a little tiny, did you see that? That was a little piece of masking fluid, and so I'm going to cover it. The little bit of blue. There we go. So now that's covered. Okay, and we're going to do the same now down on these lower areas. Now everything down here is definitely it's definitely warm greens. There's a couple of areas that have bluer greens, but okay, I think I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start over here. Can stay away from the outer edge if you choose. But again, I'm going to use something, and it's most likely going to be my might be a few areas where I might use my X-Acto knife, but I think for the most part it's going to be my Dremel tool. Okay, I didn't have as much water on there, and again, I'm not worried. There's not lots of deep colors. This will all sink in along with the yellow, and it isn't going to pick up later. It's still going to sink down in with the water. But it's such a tiny area that it's not as critical as those background areas. And even coming down into these areas, if you want, you can definitely tint them. They're just such small areas that it's not going to make too much of a difference. So I'm going to just kind of tint my water a little bit. It'll help me see where I'm wetting a little bit better. So I'll just add water and color as I'm going along. This is just a base color, just to get us started. Get some color on the paper. And then what you can do is once you see the color is really sunk in pretty good, you can take a very, very small brush. I'm going to take my 2-aught. I'm going to pick up some thicker color. And you can see just how thick it is just by putting it on a piece of paper. And these little spots that are very dark, I'm just adding a little bit more yellow. What I'm doing is I'm finding the areas that have very, very dark greens. Because even for the darker greens, what are we going to need in there? We're going to need yellow to make that green. So I'm already kind of giving it a head start by dropping in these very dark colors. Dark yellow. And now I'm going to pick up some more right on the side here. See how it already kind of builds a little bit of the shape. Now down in here, right along this area. Okay, some darker yellow. This is such a fantastic yellow to use. And I know I was talking about this earlier, but things like cadmium yellow are very opaque. So it's you can't get dark values out of it like you can with this yellow. It's just going to be one value and it's always super light. So you're giving something up by using opaque yellows. And even then, there's no way that you could get yellow on these type of layers and not have it lift and create mud with other colors. Okay, now let's just smooth that. I had a couple hairs in my color there. My number 2 here. And then we'll go ahead and we'll stop and we'll let this dry. I did notice though that right under here, there's a little bit, oops, I didn't mean to pick up yellow, but that's okay. There's a little bit of a green leaf hiding in there. So before we finish drying, we're gonna fix that. Okay. Wicking my brush just a bit. Let's add a little bit too much water on there. Okay, so let's give that a second to dry, or just let the water sink in down so I can kind of build some form with the yellow. And I'm going to take my brush. Let's put another one right under there. No, let's get a dry one. Okay, right in that little area, I am going to wet it. Actually, let me get a smaller brush. Let me get my 0 and a little bit of yellow. And you can already see that I've picked up some of that background color just by touching it. So I'm touching it more and I'm stealing from that background. Let's see how it softened it a little bit, but it still needs to be darker. So I'm going to come over here. I'm going to pick up some of that blue. We're adding that blue in. And I'm going right along the edge and pulling in color from the background to soften it so that it doesn't look like you just cut it out and stuck it right in there. Okay, so I've pulled a little bit of the blue and a little bit of the yellow into the center, and I'm just going to let those kind of mingle together. and then I'm going to use my zero. And I am going to just take a little bit of water, and you know what, actually, I'm going to pick up a little bit of the yellow with it so you can see just where I'm adding the color in the water. So I'm going right around that edge, and then I'm going to pick up some of this green. And I'm going to drop it in right on top of the water. Now remember, these little areas are really tiny. So the water, you do want to have water on the paper, but it doesn't need to be the way we were doing the background. Let's get a little bit more dark color, because see what happens as you start picking up and adding color, it starts overwhelming the area. So you can go ahead and just be really, really light with putting your water on. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and let's go. In fact, I'm just going to pick up a little bit of blue. This is a little teeny tiny area. And it's a little bit bluer. In fact, let's pick up a lot more blue. Okay, I'm going to wick my brush again because, again, we're in these tiny areas. I'm going to pull up a little bit from the top. Okay, so now I'm just going to keep going. Let's go to this. Now this area is a little bit bigger, so I am going to put just a little bit of water down. So I want to make sure that those colors do a nice blend. And actually, it's a little bit of a green. So what you want to do is just look at each little area and change it up a little bit. If it looks to you like an area has more blue, then add more blue. If you think it has more yellow, then put in more yellow. But always, in fact, I feel like I'd added too much yellow. Okay, so I pulled up some of that color and then I went back and I added some of the blue. In fact, I'm going to also go right up in to that edge. It's still going to be light. In fact, I might even have to come back in here and do a little bit more. Okay, now I'm going to come into this next area. And I'm going to need to go to my 2-aught. Okay, I'm going to pick up. So now I need some darker blue. So I'm going to pick some of that up. And it's going to go, let me get a nice flat area on my brush. And let's pick up some of the green and drop it right on top. Okay, now I'm going to use my wet brush. I'm going to try to pull those colors down. And I think we need a little bit of the green. And what you're going to start finding is that these colors really aren't as bright green as you thought they were. You start looking going, kind of thought that these were bright green, but they really aren't. Okay, now a little bit of just fixing that one edge. Okay, so now I'm going to put that brush down. And is my 0 going to be enough? Well, let's see. It's right on the dry paper. One thing that I may have to do is scrub out some of those highlights. So they may have just a little bit too much yellow in them. Now I'm going to take some water and a little bit more yellow. I might need to switch to I'm going to switch to my number 2. Here we go. Okay, I'm going to add water. Just drop water in there. And if you're not comfortable painting this way, then by all means, put some water down first and then start dropping your colors in there. Now I'm going to pick up some blue. And back to some of that yellow green. And now back to some blue. Okay, and then a wet brush. I'm going to try to stay away from that little tiny corner right in there. Okay, I'm grabbing just a little bit more. That blue. So see how much more exciting it looks when you don't overmix your color. You're letting some of the color just kind of shine through. So I've got yellow areas and I've got greener areas. I've got bluer areas. I'm just going back and kind of smoothing. Use a little bit more blue right in here. Okay, so now I'm going to give this a chance to dry and then I'll be able to go back. Add a little bit more. Make this more even because I want it to feel like it's coming straight down. Okay. So now since I've got a little divide, I can go ahead and do the same thing. Let's get the blue because this is a little bit bluer. I'm going to grab some green, brush some green in there. I'm going to pick up a little bit of water. And a little bit of darker color. And some lighter green and let that blend in. Okay, we've got our first layer on. Oh, very nice. Now we still have to come back in and do the little pink area and some of those darker black areas, but we're going to go ahead and let that dry. In fact, let's throw a little bit more green on this area. Blend out a little bit more. Okay. Oh dear. Okay, now let's go ahead and come down to these. So I'm going to do the same thing. Now I'm going to go back to my 0 and picking up greens and pick it from the darker area. Now some water. And a little bit more water. And any place that I see a divide, like there's one right there separating, you know, this front leaf area from the back. But right now I'm just getting these colors in. Okay, now more of the blue. And I might have to take my my Dremel and pull out some of the white highlights. I'm trying not to lose them, but they are tiny areas, so sometimes that happens. Okay, now let's, okay, so get some light green. I better put a paper towel back there again. Now water. And I'm going to grab some blue. And again, some of these little, you know, you can leave them out or you can, so the little veins that are kind of highlighted, especially right along there, and I don't want to get that one there, we'll have to do a little bit of detail in there. So we'll just kind of leave that for last. And let's pick up a little bit of blue right in the center. And now let's go ahead and get the little outer edge. And then again, once everything dries, then we'll come back, we'll add some darker values if we need to. This one I'm going right along the edge of the background. And I could have gone a little less color right there. But we'll fix all the little details once we've got all these basic values in. I'm gonna pick, and of course that little area is the area, and up in the top is where we're going to actually pick out some of the highlights. A little bit more yellow right along this little area right here. Okay, and let's take a step back. Now that looks a little rough, just like it does up here, but we're going to soften those edges and we're going to take advantage of the Dremel tool. In fact, what I might do is come in here and just wash a little bit of water and color over these to kind of unify it a little bit, but not right now. I'm just going to go ahead and leave it. We're going to let it dry, and then we'll come back with the Dremel tool because we need to pick out some of the hairs right along this side. Okay, so let's go ahead and get this little back area right here. Okay, let's go. I actually need my 5/0 because these little areas are very tiny. And I've noticed that these hairs right along here are a little bit bluish. So I'm going to pull some of the outside color right into this area. And then when I come back with the Dremel tool and it pulls out the light, it'll be kind of a bluish tint behind it. Okay. Okay, so again, I'm just filling in, and now I'm going to go back to my 0. Pick up a little bit more yellow and some water. And what's happening is because we're not having to focus so much on dulling these colors down, because this blue, because it leans towards the red, it's already got a little bit of color in it. It's already got a little bit of the red, so it's making it so that the green isn't as vibrant. So had we have used the green shade, we would have had to have toned down the green, but we don't have to. And that darker yellow underneath is already starting to shine, come through a bit. for the green, and I'm going right onto the edge, and then again we'll pick out the highlights. They're just so hard to do and paint around. It's almost impossible. The Dremel tool just makes it so easy and kind of fun. Now there's a lot of white in there, but I'll pick that out. I'll pick that out with the Dremel tool. Just adding a little bit more green right in there. Okay, so now that's all covered up. Okay, now let's start. Yeah, I do want my zero. I'm gonna put some clean blue right over here because I keep getting yellow in my blue. And then let's go ahead and do this little area right here. And you can see, as I've been painting, because these areas are so tiny, it's very hard to get really good values. So the values are going to come next. Right now I'm kind of just trying to get the color in, and then we'll work on value. Then we'll adjust all the edges. So I'm keeping these edges lighter for right now so that I can just go around and paint without having to stop and keep drawing. So once they're dry, then I can take some areas and darken them, and some areas will be very bright. Same with here, I'm just going to keep a little edge there. And everything will come together when we really get that value on there. Okay, let's get the stem, and then we can get everything dried, and then we can come back. just going to soften this edge. And I'm going to take some of this blue and pull it down on the background. Just blend that out a little bit, and now we just have this one little tiny area. Which either I lost my lines, I don't think I drew them in. So I'm going to have to guess. A little tiny area there. And then a dark green there, but we'll just go ahead and then there was something over there and I just left that out. I didn't think it was all that important. Didn't really need to be there. Okay, let's back out a little bit. Let's take this off. Whoa. Already it's starting to, you can see how bright these areas are. Oh, I missed this little spot right here. I didn't do this because I was waiting for everything to dry. So let's go ahead and go back there. And drop a little bit of water on here and kind of soften. And again, just getting some basic colors in here. Then we'll worry about all the lights and the darks. And this one's going to be yellowish green. So kind of cover that up a little bit. Okay, so we've got the basic greens on, so let's back out a little bit. Let's look. And okay, not bad. One thing I do see that I want to do is I want to get some of that dark green and add it just in the corner here. So it kind of blends in a little bit, so it doesn't look flat. Okay. All right, so let's get this dried and then we'll come back and we'll start putting in the detail.